Thank you, David. And I'll just start by saying good afternoon to you all. Unfortunately, Mike could not join us today, but myself, and two of my colleagues, Troy Doss and Brian Price, are here to present and answer any questions, and really glad to meet with you all. So let me put up my slides. So just a brief agenda. We're going to start by sharing some of the project background, our timeline of where we're going, followed by a review of some of the framework concepts our team has developed over the last year or so. And then some of our latest engagement in December, where we previewed some of these concepts, and then go over some next steps and where we're hoping to land. So the project, the Reconnecting Albina Planning Project, is a multi-bureau, multi-partner project, including Albina Vision Trust, the Portland Bureau of Planning Sustainability, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and Prosper Portland. And it's really intended to be a framework plan only, very conceptual. Zoning and other policy changes will come after this. So this is kind of laying that foundation for the future policy and tool changes. It's really intended to create a district-wide framework plan for Lower Albina that fosters equitable, sustainable outcomes centered on restorative development for Portland's historic Albina and Black communities. And it's using previous and ongoing planning efforts to build a foundation for refining new policies and tools. And the development framework is going to consist of several elements, including land use, public realm frameworks, street framework, and then community stewardship and governance framework. And those are being run or developed by all the project partners are kind of taking lead on those different elements. There's a lot going on this project, as many of you are aware. We have multiple objectives as our planning project team. Our partners in the district have their multiple objectives. And so our goal is to really set in place this framework that serves those multiple objectives to create a reconnected and thriving district and neighborhood. So looking to spur inclusive economic opportunity through property ownership, business ownership, and contracting, looking to anchor the existing regional entertainment venues that are already thriving in the district. And then finally, reintroducing the transportation and infrastructure connections to really kind of knit this community back together, while also being a good partner for the district. And to date, our work has really included developing a preliminary framework and a series of engagement events, including an open house, the Portland Pennant mapping tool to get feedback from community. We have had many of these touch points over the last year. And so now we're looking to refine some of our framework concepts and implementation strategies, and then take that to community in the spring and summer for more feedback and some more granular detail to help us put some actions into that report, that final framework. And then in the summer and fall, we're looking to develop a framework plan, develop our final plan and report to give to the FHA in the fall. As I mentioned, this framework plan is composed of several elements, including the land use urban design framework, a street framework plan, and the community stewardship and governance framework plan. We're really going to focus on the land use and urban design framework elements today. I also wanted to note, since our PBOT colleague isn't here, that we're not making major changes to the existing street framework. There are opportunities to expand there'll be opportunities to expand the local street network and make improvements, and also the pedestrian network as well. But the major changes are going to be kind of contained within the Broadway Main Street project itself. So the development for this project is building on a lot of, well, in particular, two past plans and frameworks that happened pretty recently. The first is Essential City 2035 Plant Urban Design Framework for the Lloyd District, and then the Albina Vision Trust Community Investment Plan. Both of these laid a pretty solid foundation for how an updated district framework might consider new zones of activity, new neighborhoods.
Good girl, Jimmy said.
The for instance, the Central City 2035 plan has kind of helped us build off the foundation of thinking about the character of different streets, such as Broadway, Wilder, Interstate, MLK, Grand, and Williams, and taking that to, we wanted to take that to community and see if those ideas still held. With AVT's community investment plan, we have looked at how they laid out different zones of activity, functions and uses in the district, as well as several other concepts for gateways, et cetera, and trying to build off that as well. So these, although some of the initial details of these plans have shifted over the years, they're really creating that foundation for this. And one of the goals is to update the elements of these frameworks to better align with the area's changing landscape. So our current district framework, this image on the left, which is a little small, I have a larger one at the end to share, is to really leverage the area's strengths by creating a fully functioning and connected district, as well as support its role as a regional destination. The framework identifies 3 sub-areas, Western, Central, and Eastern, and within them we have these kind of, the shaded areas are to indicate the different functions or zones that were influenced by the CIP, Central Cities 2035, or just our general thinking about how the future of these neighborhoods could grow. The Western area is basically the area west of I-5. It's our most dynamic and large sub area. It's a hub for major entertainment venues, looking at it also as offering future opportunities for waterfront, for opportunities along the waterfront, and also offering an opportunity for a new residential anchor with the redevelopment of the Matthew Prophet site. That's going to be going through a master plan process this year. And then the central area is really focused on that future highway cover, thinking about the community serving uses and connectivity that it's slated to serve. And then the eastern sub-area is really emphasizing a mixed-use Main Street and cultural anchors that are already existing. Some very important cornerstone historic properties for the Black and Black community there. And so just to hit home, the Broadway Wilder couplet is really kind of the anchor for this district. And so highlighted in orange, it's kind of thinking about how to stitch together, even without the cover, how to make that a more connected element throughout the district. And that's also some of the thinking behind as PBOT ramps up their Broadway Wilder project. The current zoning and entitlements already allow for a wide range of uses and building types. So instead, our team has focused on connectivity, pedestrian experience, relationship between buildings and uses, and expressions of cultural identity within the district, and just trying to really emphasize these unique sub-areas. So on another level, the framework we're building, we've kind of stripped away some of the elements to look more closely at street and pedestrian connectivity, thinking about identifying future existing desire lines, for instance, how to have better connections through the Rose Quarter venue sites or through the parking garages. Also thinking about what areas could act as key gateways or open space opportunities. On the pedestrian connectivity map here, we have this red pedestrian connection line that's really influenced by Albina Vision Trust, one of their concepts for an Albina walk, and thinking about how we could expand on that and really emphasize it in our framework plan and any future legislative projects. So kind of picking up on concepts like that and just seeing how we can help use these to revitalize and strengthen the district's neighborhood and connectivity. So next, I want to take you through each of the sub areas a little bit. They each, as I said, have their unique functions and character. For the eastern sub area, we really wanted to emphasize a mixed use Main Street on Broadway, as opposed and thinking about what the Central City 2035 plan laid out as its main function as a commercial corridor. Whereas Weidler is, we're really looking on making an improved public realm experience on Weidler and seeing that more as a boulevard. And as you're kind of just passing through that, and thinking about how those two streets interact and what their character is, and seeing what community thinks their future character should be. The images on the, we're also looking at, pushing for restored opportunities for mixed-use neighborhoods, flanking that Broadway Main Street, to again uplift and strengthen the existing cultural cornerstones in the area. So really trying to make this a neighborhood with a central Main Street couplet. And also looking to make safer, more well-defined opportunities for pedestrians and cyclists. And the notes here are our work with PBOT to try and knit some of those pieces together to make sure we're thinking about not just future activation of the corridors, but how we're connecting to the rest of the district. The photos on the right were intended to show community different ways that these corridors could be activated, showing some ideas for traditional storefront, what some of that could look like, and seeing how that resonated. Ideas for ground floor residential have come up. So thinking about where would we want to see that, mainly on Weidler, perhaps, what would that look like? So some thinking about that, and if any future guidance will be needed after this framework. Thinking about third spaces, this image here, and if there's an opportunity to create more third or alleyway or pedestrian spaces within the district as well. And then finally looking at where we'd want to see, or if we'd want to see more plaza open spaces on Broadway or Weidler, and what that might look like. For Central, it's a bit more straightforward. We have, it's really focused on the Rose Quarter I-5 highway cover. It's really focused on improved connectivity. And the image you see here on the left is based off work that AVT did with Holst and the HAB, the Historical Albina Advisory Board, back in 2024. They worked on concepts thinking about what kind of community uses and public space and connectivity could be on the cover, thinking about the southern portion as the civic community public board space. And as you move further north, it's more private, more community neighborhood serving. And so we really wanted to reapproach this with community in December, see what they still thought about it, give some more visuals on what, reflecting what was heard from the HAB those 2 years ago. So just, again, showing some images of open space, active public space, amphitheater, reflecting back on the Historic Cultural Center, showing some examples of that, or the Black Historic Culture Center that's been proposed, and also thinking about if there's a future market space, how could we throw elements of Afrofuturism, or trying to kind of weave that into the narrative of this place, because one of the things that really wanted was strong expression of cultural identity was really a theme in this part of the district. Also creating a welcoming gateway that helps stitch together the whole, the east and west parts of the neighborhood. And finally, the western sub area is, again, our biggest area. It's the most dynamic. It's had the most change even over the last year. Things have been shifting. Many of you have heard about the 1803 project, 1803 fund announcement, buying the Castle Tire facility site. and the dynamism around the Rose Quarter venue sites as well. So the goal with this sub area is to emphasize there's an opportunity for a restored residential community at the Matthew Prophet site. It's kind of anchoring this area. And then how can we use a revitalized mixed-use Main Street on Broadway to support to connect that neighborhood and then support the rest of the sub area. Thinking about and expanding and supporting the existing active entertainment district, creating again a well-defined open space network and for pedestrians and cyclists, trying to improve access to and activation of the waterfront, thinking about improved and then also since the western subarea is home to some of the most dynamic sites and property owners, we've chosen to look at 3 specific sites to engage community and envision how future development could create a better connected and engaging public realm experience. So we looked at, and we're going to show a few of the early concepts, but looked at the waterfront, how that could be redeveloped, and have been working with ZGF on a number of concepts and studies for that. We've looked at the annex building between the MODA and the Veterans Memorial Coliseum as an opportunity for maybe future infill and open space. Then on finally the parking garages just along Broadway north of the venue sites offer an opportunity for more connection and activation as well. So starting with the parking garages, given their ownership, they're owned by the city, and the central placement of these garages, they really provide an important opportunity to improve connection and activation in the center and central part of the district, or the core part of the district. And so the concept diagrams here are building off previous studies and work that have been done, laying them out for our engagement event this summer for community to see what they thought. So the first concept here is really thinking about leaving the existing garages in place, the idea of wrapping those garages with an existing use, and then making this a local improved street for better pedestrian access, and continuing that line of Flint all the way through for a better connection north-south. The second concept is looking at wrapping again uses around the garages, but maybe also stacking on top to add more intense development on that site and more a better activated public realm on Broadway. And then the third is moving or extending the street grid into the site with a new development, including parking, but allowing for more intense development and activation, not just of Broadway, but maybe on Ramsey as well, and thinking about how that could interact with the Rose Quarter venue sites. And the images here below are really to illustrate ways to activate the garages in more engaging ways. And we presented this to community. They really showed, maybe not surprisingly, a strong preference for a concept of rebuilding the garages within existing development. So the third concept, and continuing the street grid and really activating and creating some engaging uses within that development. Moving further south, this infill concept for or just idea for the Rose Quarter venue site, just looking at ways to not only improve connection to interstate and to the waterfront, but also improve the activation of interstate. So that was the intent of highlighting this for community and seeing what they thought. Then we presented a few options on the bottom. I was thinking about ways that space could be activated if we wanted to see what folks wanted to see there. And we heard the most support was for welcoming plaza or some way to activate the space that people could still pass through it, but also linger. and spend time and just enjoy views of the river. And finally, the further south, in connection with the opportunity to improve conditions on and along interstate, we explored two concepts that looked into improving access to the waterfront from the Rose Quarter sites and explored options to activate the site with community. And you may notice that all these are just party bubble diagrams, and that was the intent. We wanted to take these diagrams to community, see what they thought about these basic concepts, and then our next event in April will be to dig in more to those with some more visuals, some more perspectives, and getting some more fine-grained detail. So for this concept, or for this series of concepts for the waterfront, we worked again with ZGF to come up with two. It was hard to narrow them down to two, as you can imagine. But the first is to look at if the rail was retained where it is now, the Pacific Rail, what kind of opportunities for development would there be? Looking at maybe reserving the space across from VMC for a planned programmed open space to preserve views from the VMC to the city and the river. And then maybe looking at how the Greenway Trail would move along the rail line. We heard some positive feedback for this, but people really wanted the Greenway on the other side of the rail line, which is not surprising. So that kind of takes us to concept two, where looking at some of the plans that have been proposed for realigning the rail. We took a cue from those, realigning it under Thunderbird Way for a portion of the site, and then looking at expanding the Greenway Trail down to the waterfront. You have some more opportunity for development. And then looking at maybe there's a flyover or some sort of better pedestrian connection opportunity to the site. That was one of the major concepts for this second one as well. And so we also wanted to, in addition to talking about the activation and how to access this site, which is tricky because of the slope and the elevation change, we also wanted to see how community felt about activating the site. So thinking about, do we want to see a riverfront neighborhood, tiered open spaces, a greenway along the waterfront, kind of a quiet reflective space? Do we want to see it as a destination with an arts hub? Or is it more community serving spaces and recreation? People really focus more on the riverfront neighborhood piece and access to, or at least the feedback we received focused on really loving the idea of the Seattle tiered bridge, or the Seattle Bridge to the waterfront, which allows for pedestrian space, but also a connection down to the waterfront, was very popular, but also just providing access to the water, providing access to green and open spaces was kind of the most important thing that we heard from folks. And so on that note, we had this event and we presented all these concepts in December at an open house at Harriet Tubman Middle School. We had about 100 attendees, folks from the community. Many of you from the professional community were there too. And it was we received a lot of great feedback, a lot of excitement about the project. And so we took all that feedback and assessed it. And what we heard was a lot of direct and consistent feedback through multiple activities that we had. Some of the themes included movement, access, and connectivity, which really focused on the reconnection of people to the river and to each other. Folks really wanted to see a shift away from cars, more focus on walking and biking, universal access, and active, with things like active bridges, with streets, rail, and right-of-way. We work to support the everyday movement through the area. The other theme we heard, or kind of that came up as we assessed the feedback, was people, community, and belonging. So thinking that places should support everyday belonging through gathering and shared ownership, comfort, and care, where people of different ages should be able to meet and learn and communicate and be in community. The third theme that we brought up was thinking about active, flexible, and lived in places. Since this came out of our feedback, the feedback we received about the open spaces. We had an open space activity and just trying to gather feedback from folks on what they wanted to see in the district in terms of public and open spaces. And we heard that the open spaces or public spaces should be designed as active, flexible, and lived in places, prioritizing recreation, everyday use, while remaining adaptable to different activities, seasons, and community needs. So that was a big theme. 4 was nature as everyday infrastructure. And this was like one of our most prevalent feedback themes. So nature really came up as an essential infrastructure that supports food access, climate comfort, healing, ecological function, and should be integrated into daily life through greenway gardens, tree canopies, and habitat. We heard a lot about food forests and pollinator corridors. So that was pretty interesting and exciting. And then the final piece, cultural identity and placemaking, looking at really culture and identity is something to be seen, felt, and experienced in its place through preserved views, visible Black and Indigenous and expression in the built environment, landmarks, and art. And that was also a prevalent theme in a lot of the feedback. This is a snapshot of the process we're in at the moment, where we're taking the feedback we heard and visualizing it. The images on the left are some ways we've thought about approaching visualizing the comments we heard and how to present the work. While on the right, just looking at the feedback we received and trying to visualize that with different precedent images to help illustrate some of the community comments we heard. All this is gonna, for instance, the image here down on the bottom with the silos came from a comment we heard about wanting to paint the existing grain silos or just activate some of the existing infrastructure on the waterfront to make that in the interim more exciting. And then again, a lot of love and excitement around this bridge concept that came out of Seattle and wanting to see something similar on our waterfront at the Albina Rose Quarter. And then the idea of pollinator corridors or kind of nature elements within the district, within the waterfront. And all this is going to help inform our next event in April, which where we want to reflect back to community on what we heard to make sure we got it right, and then present a series of materials with more details on these concepts. And that'll help inform not only future policy, but future standards or guidelines for the area. And one of the things I'd love to hear from you all that we're working with ABT and our other partners on is how do we reflect in our future guidance how development can respond to the history of Albina, the Black community. There's a lot of, in ABT's work, especially references to Afrofuturism. So thinking about how that could be incorporated into future guidance, and so future development can try to imbue some of that into the community and see what folks want to have in the future. Okay, so I just wanted to close by naming our next steps again. Mainly that we have another engagement event in April, and then we plan to have some other events in June and July as well. And our other expanded engagement activities will be ongoing, including work that ABT is going to be doing as well. And we expect to have our report draft completed by the late summer, early fall. And that will be going back to the Federal Highway Administration. And then we hope to have more projects through the implementation actions of the plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to David and go through any questions.
Hey there. Thanks, Cassie. I'm going to turn it right over to our colleague, Jeremy, for questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Cassie, so much. Definitely opening our eyes to how things are emerging here. Couple questions. Please do respond in the chat if you have something you want to articulate verbally. I think we might have some space today to do that, so raise your hand as well. Don's got a couple questions. First and foremost is, or at least first is, what if the Blazers relocate and that activity is no longer there? Are there considerations or ways to think about that in the plan?
I'll take that one. This is Troy Doss. I mean, we're desperately hoping that doesn't happen and do anything we can to make sure it doesn't. But if it does, the site, well, the Blazers are only one user of the facility for one thing. So, and WNBA is going to be there. There's other events that go on there. They're trying to program it for more opportunities. I mean, it would open up the conversation of, if the Blazers weren't there, do you really need to performance venues there? I will note that we have increased the entitlements in the area as part of the Central City Code Amendment project. So there is possibilities for redevelopment opportunities there, but that is a, plan Z at the moment. We're not banking. We're hoping that never has to be an issue.
Thanks for that. I'll continue Don's question. So I'm assuming the high-speed rail were to come through there as provision for having basically a grand central station there for high-speed rail, if that became sort of a commuter or a transportation service that really was active there. These are just ideas, and then a pedestrian bridge over the Willamette. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have not heard of that concept. Is that a PBOT?
Yeah, we've heard that one before. I mean, honestly, neither of the facilities there are large enough to house that. So you'd have to basically redevelop the entire site to accommodate that there. And I think that is such a long-term issue with needing, federal and state support on a level that is unprecedented. I'm not sure we're worried about this site being a barricade to that, and nor do we would say this is the one site and only site where that could be located. So I would say as planners, we have reservations about that site for that use, but who knows? But we're not there yet by a long stretch.
So you guys, it looks like, I mean, the study really focuses on those three segments that you talked about, Cassie. How did the surrounding neighborhoods or development areas, particularly Lloyd Center, maybe, north and I guess to the south, you've considered Rose Quarter already, but how did you think about those influences of those larger neighborhoods adjacent to?
Yeah, thank you. So for the Lloyd district, that came into play when we were thinking about the eastern sub area and what role or future function some of those areas might play. Thinking about that as really kind of creating its own neighborhood that's connected to the new Lloyd district. So, and anchored by that western sub area where all that activity is going on. So it's that's kind of how we thought about the Lloyd district itself, as we're creating kind of these pockets of neighborhoods and activity where there wasn't really much before. And then we also thought about the Broadway corridor project across the river, and thinking about that connection and how how future activity, especially in the western sub area, might impact that connectivity, especially with the Green Loop there as well. So we're still thinking through what that might look like. Good question.
Well, speaking of the other Broadway, the sort of East Broadway, I know you showed some ideas about the streetscape elements and maybe how that would evolve. Is rezoning, were you thinking about rezoning some of that to encourage development and motivate sort of investment along Eastern Broadway, or does the current zoning support that in your eyes?
The current zoning currently supports that. I think any rezoning, if we did, and I'll Troy Chairman, if you disagree. I think any rezoning would be to help activate that public realm and really make improvements to that space. But in terms of uses and entitlements, I don't think we're changing quite anything there.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of some minor height adjustments along portions of Broadway Wilder as part of the code project. But you know, the zoning's already CX zoning, so it's pretty generous in terms of use. So
Sounds good. I think this, you may have touched you're the and maybe this is a PBOT question a little bit, but about the
Maybe.
circulation through there. I know that you had identified, you know, pedestrian corridors and access at a more multimodal level, but the question is, sidewalks on Broadway Bridge are already tight, Broadway Bridge in particular, are already tight with light use. The increase of vehicles plus redevelopment of the post office block, which you just mentioned on the east side, is going to create perhaps more use through the bridge itself. What short and long-term plans for supporting bikes, pedestrians, and other vehicles using multimodal paths in the green loop? How does the rest of the circulation support that sort of pinch point through there?
Okay. I'm going to say, I think that's part of what the PBOT's, I'm going to call it the Broadway Main Street plan. I think it's changed names. But I think that's part of what they're looking at. Also, I can't speak to the bridge improvements, but
yeah, there's no, well, the bridge improvements would be a broader conversation. We'd have to have a conversation with Multnomah County, who owns the bridge, and others. I mean, it's worth noting that the Green Loop is aligned across that. So, and I agree with you that the capacity is going to be an issue there with additional trips. So, you know, we haven't gotten to a point of, can you do anything to widen it? Not likely. Can you add an alternative, you know, route? That's pretty expensive. So, I mean, it is definitely going to be an issue going forward. The other thing is how the Green Loop weaves through this project area before it even gets to the bridge is another issue, because the initial concept was to have the Clackamas crossing to bring you straight over to the Rose Quarter. It's an idea that's been supported by a number of folks, including RIP City Management and the Blazers. So, although that is now definitely on hold for a while until the I-5 Rose Quarter project can sort itself out financially. So I think in the interim, what we're going to be doing is working with PBOT. PBOT's definitely looking at this, as well as others, about how you make improvements along Broadway Wilder, support the Green Loop, at least in an interim basis, until we can get a more permanent connection through there. But I mean, I think in terms of the Broadway Bridge, that's always been kind of one of the weak links in the chain of that entire concept, for sure.
David, this is your question. I know there was in terms of zoning and priority and sort of focus of uses, I know that you had demonstrated different typologies of areas of development. Is mixed use residential throughout the area a priority? So I guess is that the priority in that district, is mixed use?
Yeah, trying to create, I think part of that is housing, right? But the other part is trying to create and knit together a neighborhood. You need people, you need bodies. So yeah, that is.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that the number one priority for most planning projects in the city of Portland right now is housing. Now that said, we do want to figure out what's the appropriate mix of housing. So like the profit side is one that AVT is looking at for pretty much almost fully residential. And then we want to find opportunities along Broadway and Wilder to also bring in more. Is housing the right fit for the waterfront? Maybe, maybe not. Could you include housing and redevelopments of portions of the Rose Quarter? Certainly, but is that the direction it's going? We don't know yet. The zoning is there for that. The entitlements definitely support it, and we've increased them a little bit to even make it a little more incentivize it a little bit more. But you know, we'll have to wait and see how the market comes around on that.
Well, there's connectivity through here is interesting. You mentioned we talked a little bit about the rail. Paul's got, here's an interesting question. Is there a reason why we can't cover it? Can we bury the tracks and use that sort of transition to create connectivity, especially since I guess we have a vertical transition there? Is there a way to build that into perhaps minimizing the impact of that long sort of stitch the rail creates.
The biggest move there is to try to do a cut and cover or a tunnel closer to interstate, because the road is literally on the bank. And so it would be, I can't think of a scenario in which working both the state, federal, environmental players and Union Pacific sounds like a nightmare to me, and trying to make that happen. You'd have to literally be in the water to make that happen. So literally the bigger play is UP has been wanting to straighten out that alignment a bit, and there's an opportunity to do it. So if you did a wholesale redevelopment of that site, it might open the opportunity to do that. So that's kind of why we're playing with that concept out there. I mean, most of the things in this plan, as you've seen, are, they're not, the zoning's already there, and what little pieces aren't there are going to be there soon through a separate project. This is really trying to provide a lot of ideas for future developers on those sites. And they're major players. It's AVT, it's the Blazers ownership, who owns the waterfront, as well as the Blazers themselves. So it's, maybe we can get multiple people to come to the table on that one. That would be one we would definitely want to continue to pursue. And this is an idea that's been around since the 80s. It's, that you go through the history of plans in the Rose Quarter, you'll find that concept comes up time and again.
But we did have conversations about this idea in the early stages of like, how would we address the rail? And I think we landed on our current one because Union Pacific already had plans for realigning that rail where it is. So that seemed like the safer option for now.
This is remarkably similar to an idea that Union Pacific may or may not have put out there at one time.
Flattery, raising their old ideas and seeing what they think about them. This is a interesting one. So we all know that you mentioned the venues there draw a lot of impact, a lot of traffic, a lot of sort of activity all at once, and a lot of that is about cars and sort of the conflict of pedestrians and autos moving through there. I guess the question is how does this plan help maybe identify and address the conflict between pedestrians, bikes, sort of the multimodal access with the traffic, the auto traffic that gets pinched within the Broadway Bridge, especially during events? How could it help minimize that tension?
Wishing PBOT was here. Yeah.
Well, that's been an issue, quite honestly. A huge part of the Rose Quarter, or the I-5 Rose Quarter project, is that's been bumped around in that conversation. And I speaking for myself, I would say that the solution that was coming out of that wasn't an awesome solution, because it was basically going to bring new traffic off the freeway and circulate it around the Rose Quarter through the transit area, which is not something that we or PBOT are terribly enamored with. So that was an idea that the prior Blaze ownership were more supportive of. We're hoping the new one will be a little different than that. It's a huge issue. I mean, the other thing to remember too is that the event planning for transportation for the Rose Quarter, that plan is 30 years old. It needs to be updated. It doesn't even consider the fact that there's a streetcar there. So there's a lot of things we need to continue to do there. PBOT's plan will address some of that issue for sure. Part of it's going to be, though, how the event management happens. What's the future of the I-5 project a little bit. So I think some things might be in limbo. So the main improvements will probably be for bike ped along Broadway Weidler, leading to the bridge and then leading out as far east as like 7th Avenue.
I think also some of the plans, especially the street framework plan, has laid out some ideas for improving pedestrian infrastructure and opportunities for pedestrians to get around the district outside of, where cars are going. So it will make it, especially north-south, so making that easier, even if the traffic itself may not be alleviated for a little while.
And we have been working and having conversations with TriMet about this as well. I know they're scaling back service, but when the time comes around, they can start bringing service back around. There's conversations about how do you better serve the district as well as the profit site for AVT, since they're looking at putting about 1,100 new housing units over there.
Seems like a almost complementary programming sort of. How does the traffic gets programmed around there more efficiently during those games? It's hard. I don't know if the physical changes are going to make as big a difference as we can hope for.
We would agree.
Um,
And, you know, one other thing to note there too is, I mean, there's only so much you can do in that area. So we're trying to find every opportunity we can to create alternative or enhance circulation for bike pit. I mean, the reality is you have a lot of infrastructure that's either serving as an on-ramp or an off-ramp to I-5, and then a connector to the Broadway Bridge. So it's a challenging environment. And then you also have bike, ped, streetcar, light rail, bus, and train all going through that area. So it's you know, it's no easy task.
Yeah, if anyone works downtown and commutes to the northeast side during a Blazer game, you know, that's not the most favorite time to do it. But anyway, patience maybe is part of it as well. I think knowing and planning ahead. Tom has a question. Has resiliency been considered to accommodate a change in climate? How does climate change and the way people might be living and working evolve, especially living and working 10 years ago, pre-COVID, and then just climate changes? How have these influenced the plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the two things that come to mind for me immediately are, one, looking at improving, well, we heard from community pretty loudly at our last event that they want to see more opportunities for walking, less demand on the automobile in the area. So just by that alone, just trying to emphasize the pedestrian and bikes in the area. So that's one. The other is, I just lost it. The other is more green, more trees, more green space in the area, because it is it is kind of a heat island. So making improvements not only in terms of open space, but more green space. One of the things we heard from folks on what they wanted in terms of open space, someone just said, I just want a tree to sit under in the shade. So you know, that kind of, and so that kind of speaks volumes there. And also, this is not necessarily resiliency, but just improving quality of life in terms of noise and the pollution from the freeway. That was also something we heard a lot.
You know, one other factor too is we are significantly trying to increase housing production in that area, and it's one of the major station areas in the metro region. And so it's, you know, whereas it used to be you came into the central city to work, you know, that's changing a bit. And so seeing the out migration from the central city to other work satellite areas around the metro area is also part of the thinking here. And so trying to maximize housing production around major transit centers is something that we're going to continue to push. And this is kind of one of the first big ones we're doing.
So we have a few more minutes left. I think the next few questions are kind of like trying to hope for bigger, larger kind of ideas. But you know, can we put the Broadway Bridge in a road diet? It's one of our few bridges. It's a strong connection to the Northeast. It seems multimodal would be the best effort to try to get more finer grain traffic. But I don't know. You know, PBOT's not here. How could you alleviate that, or is it even a good idea? Is a question.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna punt that to PBOT. Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
Speculating.
Well, that's okay. Don't. I think it's just a notion. I think there's a sort of a flow of like what are the big sort of like Hail Marys to kind of create some big ideas there. This was interesting. Just I feel like knowing the great opportunity to elevate the VMC as a gem in Portland skyline. And I think that can be, you know, can go in either direction. I know the idea is to sort of reconnect and kind of restore and repair along the way. And VMC is a big, you know, a beautiful building in a lot of people's eyes, but it's also a symbol of other things. So is that part of a future cultural sort of renaissance? Or
not necessarily a cultural renaissance, but it has come up many times in wanting to preserve the views from it, because the views from inside and outside are pretty great of the skyline. So in terms of thinking about the concepts for the riverfront or the waterfront, making sure there's open space planned in front of it, so you have that both views of the city, but also views back to the VMC. But that's kind of the extent at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is, so have you guys
Mm.
been working with TriMet at all to try to figure out maybe some of the stronger connections between the different lines? This is about grade separating basically the yellow line to maybe get it to the surface where people are instead of down below on interstate. I guess that trying to provide better access. And is that something that has come up in your studies, pedestrian or community access to transit stations, either actually focusing efforts on that or thinking about different physical ways to achieve that?
It's part of the conversation. I mean, TriMet is not quite as engaged in a lot of things as they used to be, as you might imagine these days. But at the same time, we have had conversations about how to improve that connection. Also, trying to create a new, more direct bus access on Larrabee to some of the housing ideas, the housing sites there. So it'll be ongoing. I mean, it's a hard one to figure out at the moment.
Sure.
Considering a lot of the financial woes that TriMet's having when they're significantly scaling back, and they're not, according to them, they're not quite done yet. So adding more is kind of hard at the moment, but we're going to continue to push that as a concept. And I think, you know, part of it, we want to increase some of the pedestrian circulation from the Rose Quarter down across interstate anyway to get to the waterfront. So we're gonna look at opportunities there as how some of those connections could maybe enhance some of that as well. But a new stop, for instance, that's probably a bit of a challenge in that area because there's so many physical constraints. Could you bring it up onto Larrabee? That's something that's been discussed in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe that comes back around with the right amount of demand. I think you'd have to have the demand though to make that, you know, reality.
Yeah, so we may have to, other things may have to build out to create pressure to change it. So it's not going to, it's not going to be the egg or the chicken first necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think David might be kind of pulling up the summary here a little bit in his comment here, but just like, you know, there's a lot of work going on here, a lot of ways to relook at it and imagine, and hopefully there are partners kind of at the table listening and participating in the outreach that are providing feedback that helps kind of build some momentum that then gets them more interested while you guys are shaping this up. Have you heard of any, have you getting a vibe from that, or are you still kind of waiting for the feedback to get some momentum building?
For say that last part again. I was reading
Basically,
the comments at the same time.
right. Hoping your good work here will be revisited. In revisiting the area will help pull together various strong players working on the pieces for the neighborhood. So strong players and partners. You already have a few of them, you know, especially on the west end. Are there continuing people or partners emerging?
I think that is work that we are continuing to think about, especially Prosper and ABT are taking on some of that community governance and community stewardship and governance role and what that might look like in the future.
Yeah, I'm gonna respond to that as well as Don's comment above that as well. I mean, this wasn't intended to be a brand new neighborhood plan. And it's trying to lay out a lot of ideas that could be pursued and opening up the notion, well, the promise that the city's wants to make this area work and wants to find those partnerships. Now, one thing that's worth noting about this project as well as the I-5 Rose Quarter project, they started at a time when so many things have changed and are going to continue to change while you're actively trying to do a framework plan for this area. It's been a bit of a, it's been very hard. You have, you know, a new presidential administration that cuts the majority of the funding for the I-5 project. Then you have a change in ownership of one of the most significant players in the district, and we're still not quite sure what their vision is yet. So one of the things we're trying to do is lay out, hey, we have some ideas. We'd like to continue to work with you. The community clearly wants to see some things happen here. Here's the range of things that we're open to talking about. Part of what's going to need to come in here is kind of some guidance in terms of goals and objectives in the long term, what kind of, you know, implementation strategies we can provide, but what's the final solution? You know, it's kind of hard to push that on someone. I'd say that's probably the most applicable to the new Blazers ownership. However, ABT has been working with the community for 5 years now. They've got a pretty active community investment plan. It's gone through a lot of thinking, and I think that's kind of probably the North Star here.
Mhm.
And we're hoping that will lead. And I think also there's other work going on the Lloyd, you know, what's going on with the Lloyd master plan, all of that. That's going to force a connection between these two areas as well. And we're going to continue to look at that. I mean, there's been a lot of changes since we adopted the 2035 plan and, you know, formally in 2020. And then the pandemic hits and the whole world turns upside down. So, you know, the direction for the Lloyd needs to shift as much as the direction for downtown needs to shift. And that's something that's, you know, stay tuned. We're not done yet.
Yeah. Right on. Good one, Troy. Hey, it's David back. I'm gonna kind of draw it to a close on that point. That's a point well taken. I want to say very simply that I, for one, and I'm sure a lot of folks on this call, appreciate you revisiting the plan area based on the enormous amount of activity and opportunities that have just arisen over the last couple of years of, as you point out, Troy, you know, in change, potential opportunity comes along. A lot of fallow land laying in those corridors that you're talking about. And I think if there's any way to think about this incentive-based zoning or opportunity, something that's kind of guiding the needle one way instead of the other versus prescriptive stuff. It's just a thought. It's a very complex space. But wanted to thank you so much, Cassie. We're sorry that Michael couldn't be here today. We'll direct some email questions to PBOT. Cassie, thank you so much. And Troy and Cassie, any final thoughts here before we go?
Only that if you guys are looking for more opportunities to engage in this project, we'd love to see you at our future events in April and in the summer. So yeah.
Do you know where
Thank
you're
you.
holding the April one yet?
The April one will most likely be at the Harriet Tubman Middle School. We will also be tabling at the Good in the Hood event in June. I forget the dates for that. And then we'll have an event in July to talk more about kind of wrapping up the project and implementation pieces. So
Great.
yeah.
Fantastic. Great presentation. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Right.
Nice work on pulling all those questions.
Yeah, thank you,
together.
Jeremy.
Thank you all.
And,
Yeah.
and
Thanks.
thanks a lot for your good work. We'll look forward to seeing you again here before the year is out, maybe. Who knows? We'll stay updated. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. Have a great day, Cassie.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.